This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is January 29th, 2026.
I'm Scott Luneboom.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, shots have been fired in the BC Conservative race, and Mark Carney is trying to address affordability while offending Quebeckers, or at least the Quebec media class. It's been an interesting week. Most of the news is a lot of Trump bluster that we just can't. It's too much.
And it's not a repeat, too. We don't need yet another American politics podcast out there.
You can follow that bluster on our Slack by signing up at patreon.com/politicos. Let's jump into it here in BC at home. The Conservative leadership race is getting going. Just in the last day, we've had a couple announcements of who's getting in. Daryl Jones, the former Save On Foods grocery store, which was widely telegraphed to be running, is officially in. And Carrie Lynn Findlay, the former MP, is also in. No surprises.
Not really. Findlay was could go either way from what I'd seen, but yeah, Jones had been very well choreographed. I think we even mentioned that there was an event scheduled when we were talking about the stuff last week for him. So yeah, not a surprise. The field's now starting to get a little crowded.
Yeah.
Which is going to make it interesting. Be curious to see who has to drop out when the checks are due to the party. But until then, it's going to be a tough race. And even the not insignificant entrance fee might not be enough to keep the race down to a more manageable size.
Yeah, there are currently 8 declared candidates. Bruce Banman apparently is expected to announce next week, it says on Wikipedia, and Harman Bangu has also been tossed around as a potential candidate who's expressed interest in it. I do think Warren Ham will probably not make the fundraising benchmarks. And if you're asking who is Warren Ham, that's kind of why.
Who is Warren Ham?
He's, I think, the guy from Rossland who's like a contractor and is just like, thinks we need fewer consultants and lobbyists and lawyers in politics. And so he's putting his name forward.
Pretty typical interior populist business person. Not an unheard of archetype, but does not seem to have the juice to carry it forward would be my assessment there. So kind of agree with you. I don't think we're going to see him when it comes time to make that final deposit to get on the ballot.
He's no Donald Trump come from business to win over the party, I think. Because Donald Trump had quite the profile before he launched his presidential bid.
Yeah, we thankfully have no reality TV stars in
not
the race
like
here.
When the federal Conservatives had their race 2 times ago when what's his face?
O'Leary in the leadership race back in like 16, 17 to the first big one to replace Harper, where everybody went in and it was like a 14-person ballot.
That's what this is looking like. But yeah, we'll see who can actually raise money. We'll get into that in a second. Jones, unsurprisingly, was questioned as soon as he announced, hey, groceries are unaffordable. You're talking about affordability as an issue. Aren't you the problem? I don't know if they asked specifically that or, that pointed, but it was that general question of why can people trust you to deal with affordability?
And the answer he gave was one that really seems more at home in a boardroom than a political campaign. I don't think anything in there was technically wrong, and yeah, there's a bunch of factors going into this stuff, and that's all well and good. Politically, though, changes to fertilizer prices and secondary tariffs is not necessarily going to be the thing that is going to have a lot of juice when it comes to getting people excited, even if it is technically correct.
Yep. The other interesting note on the leadership race is a tweet that came out from candidate Yuri Fulmer. Fulmer is the current chancellor of Capilano University and another businessman. He has already gone after fellow candidate Caroline Elliott quite hard. She's political commentator, has put her name forward for BC United in the past. He criticizes her for donating to the BC Liberal Party, which she was a member of.
Which is somewhat awkward considering your Fulmer also has donated to the BC Liberal Party, which resulted in this whole thing basically turning into the other supporters accusing the other campaign of being a bunch of closeted liberals.
Yeah, part of Fulmer's... part of
silly,
Fulmer's...
self-destructive, particularly when it's this is the party that replaced the old one, and this is the thing that just happens in BC politics, where one party fades, another one comes in, and a lot of that old party, because you can't just invent an entirely new political coalition. You're gonna have to take large parts of the old one if you're gonna have any success on it, and that inevitably means the Liberals had plenty of former Sotreds, and the Conservatives are going to have former PC Liberals.
A part of Fulmer's critique is that she donated during and even after the last election to BC United, when they didn't even run candidates. So he's like, why was she supporting this moribund corpse and not committing to the new conservative cause fully, and now thinks she should lead it? So I get it. It's a loyalty kind of test, or like, what's her commitment to this, which I think is a fair question when you're running for leader. But at the same time, like you say, allegiances change. Fulmer has supported BC United in the past when it was the flag bearer of the Free Market Coalition.
In addition to that, several of the Elliott camp were out there pointing out that despite Fulmer's recently stated opposition to land acknowledgements, that his company's website was full of them and stuff, as well as there was something climate related too. So there's like a lot of fire going both ways on the who was actually a liberal on this, which I don't think is going to be productive at all. There's some potential juice, but it's not good for the party's long-term prospects to turn it into a fight over that.
I like how the federal NDP leadership race started with Heather McPherson talking about how there's too much gatekeeping in the NDP, which started a whole debate that we don't need to rehash. But like, this is literally starting with gatekeeping.
Yeah, I mean, she was right there.
This is what gatekeeping looks like.
Bad, yeah, it shouldn't be done here either on there, particularly as you do have to build out a new party on this. I've in a similar vein, I've also seen a couple BC NDP types basically try and make the argument that the Conservatives are just the same old Liberal Party, which, yeah, there's a lot of the same people, but doesn't really seem to be like the best line of attack when going after them, because what seems to me to have the most juice would be hitting them on these people are nuts, not these people are the same people that more or less ran the province like okay enough for 16 years that they got reelected a bunch and are just kind of, boring downtown Vancouver business folks who are probably going to keep your taxes low, versus the more nutty stuff.
I think it depends who wins.
Well, I guess general framing going.
If you have Ian Black or Peter Millibar win. It's kind of a, oh look, the former Liberals are back. Well, I guess Millibar wasn't as involved in the former Liberal Party, but he's always had that vibe. And they were not liked at the end. I mean, the Liberals used the NDP's 90s record against them for a long time after they were out of office. And
after about a decade, though, that starts to lose its potency. And I feel like we're in that point now where...
Yeah, the NDP has its own record now to be held.
Yeah, nobody cares
against.
Nobody voting in 2026, 2027, whenever the next one's going to be, is going to care what Gordon Campbell did in 2002.
Well, David Eby has been talking about other things this past week. He and his Attorney General have weighed in on a number of things with some stronger rhetoric than we've seen for a while on the influence of Americans and the freaking who is it, the ambassador on the potential of a separation referendum in Alberta, where they are saying, it'd be great if y'all just came down here, which is...
Don't think it was the ambassador. It's one of the cabinet members, I think. Might be Besant.
Yeah, it was Besant.
Don't worry. The ambassador has once again proven he is the world's worst diplomat and said something that pissed off a lot of Canadians, but wasn't on this.
But at this point, David Eby is pissed, and more pissed than it seems like most Canadian politicians are willing to openly be. He posted today a clip of a speech he was giving where he says there's an old word to describe going to a foreign power and asking their assistance in breaking up a sovereign country. It's treason. Canadians are standing together in defense of this beautiful land. And there's a few stories of the Alberta Prosperity Project, I think it is, people and some of the pro-separation meeting with Trump administration officials to talk about getting their support, which, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to nitpick the specifics here. Doesn't seem good. I don't think
we have to. We don't have to necessarily fall back onto, a specific provision of the criminal code. It's a word in fairly common usage that we all know the definition of, and it's on point here.
So
there's no need to limit it to narrow legalism, which is very annoyingly what the discourse over this turned into.
I mean, on Blue Sky, which is doing what Twitter always did, I think it's really interesting that Eby's the one speaking up about this. The question was kind of put to Danielle Smith, and she, I think, sidestepped this specific and did generally pledge support to Canada, but wasn't also...
She has soft sympathy. I won't go as far as to say she's a clear separatist, but she has some soft sympathies in that direction, so not unexpected she wouldn't come out swinging the way Eby did.
Yeah, Smith is supporting a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, as her specific quotes. Doug Ford, meanwhile, said enough is enough, and Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew joked that all the talk makes him want to have a referendum as well, because he's the one who can just chill and is probably the most popular premier in Canada right now and can just be like, I can just crack jokes while everyone else has serious issues to deal with. But it is notable, right? We haven't heard similar talk from Carney about this. We haven't heard him really go hard about specifics that are happening in the States, or about the potential, what we talked about with the involvement of the cabinet minister speaking out about inviting Alberta to join. We'll talk a little bit more about Carney in a bit, but I think Eby has a lot to gain here. I can't imagine, there's a part of BC voters who are sympathetic to Trumpism, but they're not his voters and never will be. And I think taking a stronger Captain Canada line, like Doug Ford regularly does, probably stands to benefit him. Yeah. It's similar to how his attorney general recently spoke out, Nikki Sharma, about ICE doing deals with Pattison and Hootsuite, two BC companies, people, and, had some stronger words than we usually see. She says people are watching in horror what's happening there. And she thinks business leaders across the province need to think about their role in what is unfolding and make decisions that would not lead to some of the outcomes we're seeing unfold in the States. She's not specifically saying the province will attempt to block any of these deals, some of which they can't. That would be on the federal government. But I was surprised to see her speak out about this, honestly.
Yeah, it's a little odd for the attorney general, if you picture in that word, but just as a BC politician, doesn't strike me as too odd or unexpected.
Yeah, it's more
I didn't
which
mean
hat
as you think she's
AG.
wearing at the time.
Yeah, I more meant even as deputy premier.
Still more measured and less bombastic than
Sure.
the EB stuff.
Yeah, so
which, come to think of it, when he was AG, he was more measured than Horton was in a bunch of cases.
Very true. The other thing EB went off on this past week while he's in meetings with the other premiers is on the extortion wave, which we talked about last week a little bit. It's happening in Surrey. He's escalated his language once again to calling it a terror attack in slow motion. He compared the fact that some of the participants in these extortion activities and these crimes have applied for refugee status to the idea that we'd never let a terrorist apply for or get refugee status. And it's not clear any have actually gotten refugee status from what I read, just that some have applied, which
stops the process of removing them from the country, which is what a lot of people are finding kind of objectionable about the situation. It's more like the abuse of the system,
sure,
than that necessarily what the final outcome will be in 2.5 years when this gets adjudicated.
That's we need faster systems problem. We can still arrest them in the meantime. But yeah, comparing extortion and crimes, even serious crimes like arson and shootings and gang violence, to terrorism feels a bit much to me. Right? We talked about how crisis is a political word last week, but terrorism does have, not to overly litigate it, but terrorism does have a broad definition and there is a legal definition to it, but there's also just the broader understanding, and not things can be bad without being terrorism.
Yeah, and people can be terrorized, as is happening in Surrey, without it specifically being terrorism. Just there does, by most definitions, need to be a political component to it, and it does not appear there is one. So
yeah, it's a weird week with words.
Yeah, I mean, think about how all these connected together. It does kind of feel like the government is getting a little more bombastic, going out there with stronger rhetoric, in part because it's not really been able to deliver much and doesn't have a bunch of clear things it's aiming at in the short term to show as deliverables. I mean, it's not a new observation on the podcast that the EP government seemed to run out of steam and new ideas sometime around right after they got reelected, and does kind of feel like EB is substituting more aggressive comms for actually making progress on and not just making progress, but delivering tangible results people will notice on a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah, some of that, I vacillate back and forth in this. I think some of it is the slow nature of the work being done. They are going out and announcing a bunch of new mines. That's happened in the last few weeks, and even got a pretty glowing piece in the Globe and Mail talking about the NDP as an important ally for the mining sector and vice versa. And the provinces are also, at least the western provinces and northern province territories, have signed a critical mineral strategy to work together. That stuff isn't sexy or quick, but it does make a difference in some of those communities. I don't know how much it will politically pay back the government, but it does kind of commit. It does fulfill that vision EB was talking about last year as urgent, but it's hard to quickly turn big projects into reality.
So that's definitely part of it, but also this is year 9 of the government, and at this point there's starting to be noticed that some stuff hasn't really improved all that much since they got elected. Housing unaffordability continued to climb, and there's been some recent correction on that, but if you in 2017 told people where housing prices would be now, they would say the new government failed at it. And there's just a bunch of stuff like that where they may have been doing stuff, and it may have even on the margin had positive impacts, but you look at the overall impression of it, and it's not a huge amount to show for 9 years of work. And I think that's going to be the thing that starts to dod them on it, even on the slow-moving stuff, is we would have expected the slow-moving stuff to have borne more fruit by now.
Hey, EB only became premier, what was it, 4 years ago now? 3?
Yeah, but he carried on from the
that
same.
Is actually, he has more of a legacy as premier than... he's getting up there. Given the average NDP premier served for 3-4 years, he's almost at the point where he's been premier as long as Dave Barrett did, and then he'll get up, and he's been longer than Ujjal Dosanjh or Dan Miller were premier, and then it's catching up with Mike Harcourt and Glenn
also
Clark.
Think about this other stuff like building out the infrastructure for the province. There's Site C got finished, but and the Patello Bridge its replacement is pretty much coming to a conclusion, but we have this same number of kilometers of SkyTrain as when the government got elected in 2017, because I'm pretty sure the Evergreen line opened 2016, just before. Haven't managed to open a new SkyTrain line. The Massey Tunnel is in no better shape than it was at the start of the government. There's just,
the new Patello Bridge is open technically.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's on the list of stuff that got done, but you look around at the major projects that were important for Metro Vancouver. I mean, Patello Bridge is one of them, but I don't think anyone back in 2017 would have picked it as the top infrastructure challenge the region was facing.
All of New West just stopped listening to the podcast. But no, I don't disagree. The other thing is he's got, potential labor strife coming up as the BC Teachers Federation is still in negotiation. Well, I don't even know if they are negotiating right now, but they should be with the province. And it doesn't seem like a deal is set to be signed to keep the schools open until... And so we could be seeing a strike vote and action on that front, which will not go well for the government. I don't think they're going to go as hard as Daniel Smith did. I can't see him invoking the notwithstanding clause to force them back to work with a contract, but it seems it seems like they're in a tough place with the teachers where they don't want to move on some key issues, and stay tuned, I guess. In the meantime, one place they are getting more money from is BC Parks users and campers, as they've just announced that camping fees for the upcoming year are going up a whole fucking bunch. They're still cheap. Provincial parks are still cheap, but if you're going on the shoulder season, it's a trivial change of 40 cents per night. If you go during the summer, they are increasing by an average of $13 a night, which, these are usually $30 or $40 campsites at most, sometimes less. They are saying this is going to be an average nightly rate of $30 in the shoulder season and $42 in the summer. So it's like a sizable increase in the summer fees to get up to there. But still pretty affordable, especially compared to some private campgrounds. And the backcountry fees are also going up to $17 or $25, which is still pretty trivial, but it's like significant bumps. And interestingly, they have also announced a $20 a night out-of-province surcharge. So if you are an Albertan or American or otherwise not, living in BC, you will pay more to access our camps.
Which is not unheard of. I know in the US that's common on state parks that you get a discount if your license plate is from that state. And we'll go into the new national park stuff, which is dumber. But I hadn't really heard of a Canadian jurisdiction doing that with their park system.
Yeah, and it's one of those weird things where I'm not sure how I feel about it. I get the incentive to do it, but the risk now is that Alberta, reciprocates, and Alberta campgrounds now start charging British Columbians to camp there, and kind of, goes across the country. And we're not talking big amounts of money. It's just like annoying amounts. And I don't know, maybe it's justifiable, maybe it's not. It's definitely not in the spirit of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, but it's also not something I think anyone's going to get too mad about. And maybe it enables people to access BC parks a little bit easier because they are in pretty high demand.
Yeah, I mean, that's the backdrop of all of this, is that the park system is in very high demand. The camping slots get scooped up very quickly, so putting a little higher fees on it is probably going to shift the demand over a little bit and might make it a little easier for people to actually get parks in there. But yeah, short of opening up a bunch of new parks and new campgrounds, there isn't really a good way to address the supply-demand mismatch short of increasing the park fees or just letting it be a mad rush whenever those come available, and most people are just out of luck at that point.
Which is now officially 3 months prior to your travel date. So if you want to go in 4 months, you have to wait to book your camping. But just 3 months is your time to look ahead. I think it's 7 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, if you're just looking for a legacy item, maybe open up a big new provincial park with a bunch of campgrounds.
I think a few, they have been slowly opening more. There's like a trickle of announcements, but there's just such high demand, especially in the Lower Mainland, and there's only so many places you can put new provincial parks and campgrounds. They have expanded some. They highlight the Ernest C. Manning Provincial Park has expanded and is the only fully serviced campground run by BC Parks. But yeah, and it's also the thing no one's really mad at, right? Like, you don't want to waste a whole bunch of money on parks, but like, parks are pretty well valued across the political spectrum because people like camping, and it's a uniting thing in Canada. I'm thinking a lot about it because I just took my trailer in to get service this morning. So I want to go camping and would love to have access to BC parks later this year.
Yeah, if you ask what the right in BC is mad about when it comes to parks, it's usually that there is more access to the general public for them.
Mm-hmm. So, build more parks, David Eby. Even if you name them the John Horgan Provincial Park, people will probably still go to it because they liked him. Let's jump to federal politics, though, and come back to Mark Carney and speeches. The first thing he did this week Well, it wasn't the first thing he did this week, but Parliament returned this week, and his big announcement for that was, well, he's popular on the foreign affairs thing, but he knows probably that Canadians don't give a shit about foreign affairs when it comes to elections. They only care about affordability. And what do Liberals do when it comes to affordability? They throw money at people. They create a new rebate or tax credit and call it a grocery rebate. And that's what we are getting is an expanded GST credit that is being called a grocery rebate to put a few $100 back in some people's pockets. They're increasing the GST credit by 25% for 5 years starting this July. There will also be a one-time payment equivalent to a 50% increase for this year. And that, they say, will provide support for 12 million Canadians, up to basically like $1,900 a year for a family of four, or $700 a year for a single person. Now, the GST credit, it's worth noting, has a pretty low cutoff relative to some other benefits. It's like $57,000 annual income, and after that you get nothing. So, I mean, it's very good for those who will get it, but it's not a real universal benefit.
Yeah, well, what immediately came to mind when I first heard this announcement was actually the final days of the Trudeau government, where also confronted with some affordability challenges in politics. They resorted to floating the idea of a rebate, and in the now pretty famous resignation letter from Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister at the time, basically eviscerated it as a costly political gimmick the country could ill afford at the time. And I don't really see what has changed on that. And if anything, we need to make sure our money is going to things that strengthen the country and its ability to maintain its sovereignty. If anything, that has increased in importance since then, which, isn't to say government shouldn't do stuff towards addressing affordability, but this comes with an $11.7 million price tag, and if I'm looking at what could really use a bunch of extra resources, it's not necessarily tax credits.
Yeah, it's really weird. This kind of came out of nowhere. Like, affordability is definitely still an issue, but this, rebate, I don't know. like I said, it will definitely help those on the lower income strata. There is a second half to this announcement that is about tackling food insecurity, supporting producers, and strengthening supply chains, which is primarily a $500 million fund as part of the Strategic Response Fund to help businesses address the cost of supply chain disruptions without passing the costs on to Canadians at the checkout line. So basically giving money to the grocery stores. And there will also be a $150 million food security fund for small and medium enterprises. And I think some money for food banks, and allowing them to expense greenhouse buildings on their taxes, and expanding the national food security, or they're developing a national food security strategy, which is all fine. Oh, and of course, supporting the Competition Bureau vaguely,
which could definitely be doing more. And I'm not sure it's just from a lack of support, or it might just be the Competition Bureau is just not actually all that interested in really cracking down on some of the stuff. Just, we talked, like a year and a half ago about the Competition Bureau's report on the grocery industry, and for the most part, the challenges with competition aren't directly anti-competitive stuff. It's just difficult to get new stores up and running and whatnot. But there was a couple pretty glaring items in there, such as the using limits on what basically using their market power as leasers, I think it was, to basically block their landlords from leasing to other grocery stores nearby and stuff, which is just like blatantly anti-competitive and should obviously be gone after. And I've not heard anything about movement on that front in the time since that was discussed.
Yeah. So I would love to see a beefed up competition bureau really do some more work. Like, we've gone through multiple price fixing scandals, and the most that seems to have come out of that was like most people got a $5 bread gift card, and I think another one is on the way as they go, oh, actually, it was a bigger scandal than that. And so I feel like people should be madder than they are, because things are expensive and keep getting more expensive.
Yeah, I mean,
and nothing in here seems like it's going to solve that.
Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing is there's a lot of the food cost stuff is unsexy things to do with supply chains and growing conditions and all of that, which, like we were talking about at the start with Daryl Jones's entry into BC politics, doesn't make for the most compelling of grocery politics, which is unfortunate, but just kind of how things are. But like, remember like a couple years ago when like egg prices shot up and then they collapsed and then they dropped down to something normal? Like, there was a lot of people at the time talking about how, this must have just be because there's, too much greed or collusion in the egg industry. No, it was just a case where there was a big avian flu spike and caused a shortage of eggs. Prices climbed up, and then once the market sorted itself out and supply rebounded, it kind of dropped. And it's a lot of
I don't remember an egg swing in prices in Canada, because we have supply management that keeps a lot of those swings tempered.
By keeping them artificially high the whole time, to be clear.
Oh, they're still cheaper than they are in America at this point. But I
won't be so sure on that.
It's interesting. I think Pierre Poilievre signaled some initial support for doing something on this, because I think the Conservatives are trying to play at least they had Andrew Scheer, I think he's the House leader, still give a little, the Conservatives are going to try and make Parliament work this, session, and then immediately Pierre Poilievre defaults to attack dog mode when he gets there against Mark Carney. So we'll see. I could see Don Davies, NDP, supporting these as just like a do something bill, but it really begs a lot of questions more of like, how is Mark Carney's government going to help Canadians? It's clear he's got a good international presence. He's back there, but he's clearly more comfortable there, as was very well proven when he landed in Quebec City and gave a speech on the Plains of Abraham, repeatedly referencing the battle there as not the time that Quebeckers that the French got defeated by the British, and Quebeckers view themselves as being subjugated by the British for the next 150 years. But rather,
in Quebec,
it's the time.
It's described as the conquest. Just to kind of level set on what the perception.
It's why the license plate says "We will remember" or "Je me souviens" or "I will remember." So it's not it's when we all started to get along moment that Mark Carney weirdly painted as in his speech.
Yeah, it was just such an odd choice there, and
to give when you can barely speak French too.
Yeah, I don't get it. So, Mark Carney spent like a lot of time outside the country over the past, 20, 30 years. And like, there should be some stuff there that's, faded a bit in his consciousness about kind of some of those sorts of cultural touch points that are going to cause issues if you interact with them. But his PMO is full of Quebeckers. Did nobody there think, wow, this is a bad idea? That's the part I'm actually most curious about. It isn't why Carney missed the mark on this. It's that how come nobody put a stop to it before it happened?
Even better is that afterward, when he was questioned about this, because he also notably took no questions after this speech, and then canceled his post-cabinet retreat press conference, which also really, I think, irked the media both in Quebec and across the country now. He did eventually get asked about this, and he doubled down. He said, no, I talked about how Francophones have struggled in this country, but they're like a resilient people. The resilience of the French-speaking people is what helped make this country great. It's like the sitting up there going, why are you booing? I'm right. That's the genius of Canada. So the PQ and the Bloc are very happy about this. No, officially they're very mad, but they're clearly very happy because there's nothing better for the separatist cause than getting to yell at the Prime Minister of Canada as being an out-of-touch Anglo who hates them and doesn't understand them, which is how this came off. Now, some of the other reaction is just like, who cares? Which is fairly common, and it's maybe this is just a Quebec pundit class and political class upset when a lot of people are more concerned with grocery prices and Trump than the nuances of Canadian history. And
I normally be pretty sympathetic to that. Doing that when it looks like the PQ's about to win a provincial election in the coming year and then go right into a sovereignty referendum, on the other hand, that's a bad time to do it, and one where, the who cares is not actually a great response to it.
And to be clear, this is just like the internet Reddit chatter that I was reading on it. It's not like Carney going, who cares? But yeah, Carney is a weird man. It's got to be tough to go from like China to Davos to Quebec City and try to speak to all of these audiences in different ways, but that's the job you wanted, man. So try to make it a little bit better. Yeah. Couple more stories to close off the episode. The federal government's Foreign Influence Transparency Registry is starting to get put together as they have announced the appointment of Anton Bogman, I think that's how you pronounce that, as the first chair of it. This is, for those who aren't paying attention and very deep in BC politics, this is our former chief electoral officer from British Columbia. I think it's a good thing. I don't know who our chief electoral officers are. It means our election systems are working well. They shouldn't be in the news.
Indeed. His term ran from June 2018 to November 2025. So there was a couple not great parts of the last election. Specifically thinking of someone up in the interior north or interior that kept hold of one of the ballot boxes because they couldn't get it into the elections office that day, which it's permitted under those circumstances, but there was some issues with it then getting misplaced and misreported. It was just like there were a couple messy bits. Didn't materially change the election, but it was not the smoothest run, which is a bit of a black mark. But the rest of the period went, I think, pretty well. I don't think there were many election issues during that period otherwise.
Yeah, and during those elections, he also did, I believe, a bit of investigation into potential foreign interference. And so I think that is where he has a little bit of a leg up here. He's also fluently bilingual, which is rare for a British Columbian, not unheard of, but good for him. This is not official. These are sources who leaked to the Globe. The name actually has to be approved by the opposition, I believe, first, or at least they get recognized opposition parties, Senate groups have to be consulted on it before it's fully announced. Because it's the kind of position you want all party buy-in on, given the importance to our nation's democracy. So we'll see.
It's also good that this is finally starting to get some movement on it. Because this has been in the works since at least 2024, and it has just been slow walked ever since then, despite the issues that were talked about a lot during 2024, and also, well, just look at everything else going on in the world. Plus that whole, is the Alberta separatists really a front for the Americans? Like, there's a lot going on that.
Yeah, I was going to say it'll be very funny when the Alberta Prosperity Project has to register for.
I mean, that's exactly the sort of thing that should be getting investigated, and having a registry like this is real helpful because it's a little like an Al Capone on tax evasion. Like, the people who are being malicious about it probably aren't going to register, but the fact that they don't means you have a real good, nice, easy tool to use on them when you do catch them. Even if you can't demonstrate the more nefarious aspects of it.
It's better than nothing. I've watched the lobbyist registries for a couple of years, and because I've at various times been on the edge of having to register, I think I'll have to register soon for work purposes. But I get the broad point of these things, but sometimes they feel like make work paperwork that doesn't actually accomplish the banner title. Like, I'm not sure the lobbyist registry has made lobbying more transparent, or if anything, there's more lobbying than ever these days, and some of them are in the registry. I'm not accusing anyone of not registering, but it's a complicated world out there, but hopefully this helps. And there are many other recommendations in the Hogue report that should be acted on. This weekend, make sure to keep an eye on Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Leadership Convention, as delegates there will vote in his leadership. It seems likely he will hold it. It's a delegated convention, and he's been working the phones nonstop, according to the reports. So
the Ontario PCs are holding theirs at the same time.
Yeah, Doug Ford will be fine.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Ford's chances. It's more that the big-shot of more moderate Ontario Conservatives aren't going to be trucking out to Calgary that weekend.
Yeah, so like anything could happen, but I don't know. Weirdly, in the CBC piece, one voice says he should be aiming for what Stephen Harper got in 2005, which is 84%, to quiet naysayers. That would be a pretty solid result. As always, no one else put any number out there. Just like, we need a united, solid number. If it gets under 65, it's definitely bad.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's the Clark threshold that kind of always lingers out there as the soft benchmark, but We have seen there is some room for some flexibility if you're at the bottom end of that range.
There's been a number of polls as well this past week about Pierre Poilievre. The party is doing still mostly okay, except in one or two outliers that have the Liberals up quite a bit. I think Liaison was the weirdest, but for the most part, they're still in the high 30s, sometimes 40%. Pierre Poilievre's personal numbers are not great, though, nationally, but they're pretty decent among conservatives. They're pretty strong, and that suggests a limit to their growth with him if they continue, but he could turn things around if he settles things on this leadership review.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges is, with the exception of the foreign affairs stuff, it's for the most part an issues, the broader issue set's favorable to the conservatives. The real challenge is that Poilievre lays the party a bit, and that seems to put a bit of a lower ceiling than they otherwise would have on them. But it's also not clear that throwing everything into a leadership race and changing things up is necessarily going to put them in a stronger position. So it's a little bit of no matter what you do, you're in a suboptimal spot for them.
Well, speaking of leadership races, the NDP's continues on. The membership deadline just passed a few days ago. I think it was yesterday, actually. This week feels long and short at the same time. The debate in BC, the English language debate, is coming up on February 19th, and the decision will be made March 27th to 29th. And we now know for sure who the candidates all are, as they have officially blocked Bianca Mugienyi from the leadership race after she had applied.
Did we talk about her previously, or is this
no,
the first
we skipped it?
Mostly because it was very clearly not a serious leadership entrance. It was more of a, I'm just here because you kicked out Eve Angler, so I'm running in his place as a incredibly obvious proxy candidate. Most notably because she said she was doing it as because he didn't make it in. Also, she is his wife.
Scott, that's the sexist response to this, and the racist one because she's a black woman who does have an impressive CV for an NDP candidate, where she was a co-author on the LEAP Manifesto. She led the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, a left-wing think tank, and has been a columnist and pundit on these issues for a while. But like you said, she didn't run on any of that. She stood up and said, I'm running because you won't let Eve run, and if you let him in, I'm out, and I'm just going to run on his platform. And maybe she was involved heavily in drafting his platform.
Probably was.
It smells like a proxy and disingenuous, and the party told her as much in their rejection letter, which I've only seen the Globe and Mail's quotes of it. I haven't seen the full thing, but it's like, you're a proxy. That's not a legitimate candidate. Go away.
It's less it smells like a proxy, and more it's they put up a big billboard saying this is a proxy.
It's such a bad way to do it.
Really, the campaign that went out of its way to alienate and pick fights with the party is not necessarily conducting itself in a way that is going to ingratiate itself to the Green Light Committee. That's shocking.
My favorite part is I saw some people online being like, what actual rule did she break in the leadership rules? And if you go through there, there's enough like vague language around you should act with integrity and in good faith and act in the interests of the party, and like there's a catch-all category too. So the whole debate was dumb. I'm frustrated and disappointed, and at least that kind of ends that as we now move into the final stretch of the race. The other interesting thing in the race this week is Abby Lewis's campaign reports that they have raised over $1 million, which actually just exceeds what Jagmeet Singh raised in 2017. I did look up, which is more than I expected, so good for both of them. He seems to be becoming quickly the front runner in the race, though Rob Ashton is racking up a number of union endorsements. And Heather McPherson has some of the more party establishment MP. Well,
yeah, and there was
she doesn't have MP endorsements. She has provincial elected endorsements.
Yeah, there was also some polling that's come out recently that, with a lot of caveats, because the NDP base is so small and the people are actually voting, it's an even smaller subset, and it's difficult to poll, did look favorable for McPherson. So, yeah, you should look at it like 3 different ways, and which one of those ways you choose would point in a different direction for who's the likely victor.
I wouldn't trust a single poll on this. I saw, I think it was Abacus had something on the NDP leadership, but it was like, if people picked her picture. That's what it was. That was one. They just throw the pictures without names, and they're like, who do you think should be the next leader? They picked her. They excluded Tony McQuail and Tennille Johnston from this run-up. And I think he had another question that, like, in the most broad strokes, described McPherson, Ashton, and Lewis's campaigns slightly differently. And it was kind of divided who was leading in that. I think it was Ashton had the strongest support, but, like, what are we doing here? Anyway, we'll find out in 2 more months who the next leader of the NDP is, I guess. And that has been Politicoast. Find links to everything we talked about at politicoast.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicoast. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicoast is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.